Close Up is brought to you by the Kia Sorento R, redefining the power of Kia.
It is the winter of discontent for the education sector, a row over class sizes cutting teachers in schools. But while those disputes are relatively civil, the tertiary students are getting stuck in, taking to the streets, then blockading them. So what's their beef?
It's not fair that people that are rich can go on to postgraduate study, but then if you're poor, you can't.
By getting rid of that allowance, you're basically restricting the opportunity for postgraduate study to kids with parents rich enough to pay for them.
Why can't you borrow the money and pay it back when you get a good job?
That's definitely something I'll consider.
You're not necessarily guaranteed that good job, and a lot of people are finding that they can't get that job here in New Zealand, they're going to go overseas.
Why not borrow the money to meet your living costs?
Because that's debt. I don't think you should have to do that. You eventually have to pay that back, and I don't think that's right.
The student loan scheme.
Okay, I've got debt coming out of my ass.
People are struggling, people are facing cuts right across the country. Why should students be immune to that?
I really don't accept that claim.
Joe, there's no such thing as a free lunch anymore.
Well, why shouldn't there be? You know what I mean? The money is there, it's just getting channeled in the wrong places.
Your advice to the government?
Listen to people.
Investing in education has benefits, you know what I mean? It creates better citizens. It does.
OK, some interesting theories here, including the free lunches, but what's got them rolled up is the cut to the student allowances, which makes it harder for students to stay longer in university. Yes, they can still take a loan, but they argue it's adding to their mountain of debt. In a moment, we hear from the Tertiary Education Minister, but first, Matt McLean with some students studying clinical psychology. Now, this is exactly the sort of skilled graduates we're told New Zealand needs.
It's a really sad situation. They have to skimp.
Lecture Theatre 407 at Vic Uni, and emotions are running high. These are the clinical psychologists of tomorrow. Work, they say, that's crucial in this country given the rise of mental health issues.
1 in 3 New Zealanders suffer from a mental illness. Last year, 600 children in Wellington were seen in the public health system for mental illness, and we need psychologists here in New Zealand.
But these students are having to make a gut-wrenching decision.
So there's a chance I'll have to kind of dismiss my last 6 years and walk out of the course with 1 year to go to finish.
And they're already in massive debt.
My student loan is $90,000 as I sit here today, and I'm saying I need allowance because it's more than I'm allowed to borrow, and I can't live off the amount that I can borrow.
$170, they say, is the most they'll be able to borrow a week. Without a job, they agree they won't be able to scrape by.
I can't even imagine what it would be like trying to get this far on even less.
To have that kind of ripped away from me when I'm so close is just so frustrating.
In the final year of the course, students are required to work a 4-day internship, 90% unpaid, plus a full day's classes, plus study for assessments and exams.
The program itself has said that it's unfeasible to work in your final year. So for me, if I can't get some kind of financial assistance, I'm going to have to really rethink whether I can complete my training.
The difference in government funding for these students will be between around $40 to $80 a week.
$40 for a student is unspeakably critical, because I think John keeps saying, oh, it's not that big a difference that we're taking away. And I do feed myself off $40 a week, and I think for him to say that that's a negligible amount of money, I cannot wait for the day that's a negligible amount of money for me.
Jackie Wall is 24, engaged to a fellow student in her 5th year of psych, and is calling for change.
With cuts of funding next year, there's big questions of how many of my classmates are going to be able to complete the program. So it's very, very scary.
Check out the Facebook page she's started.
We don't know what we do. I don't think we're going to be able to afford to keep going.
One student, Sissy, had a heartbreaking story of the compromises her family are now considering making.
The situation for next year pretty much is if I don't get a scholarship, my family is, you know, everyone's thinking, they're like, okay, well, your grandma gets a pension. Should we see if she can sacrifice some of that money, and then we can see what we can, you know, it's a really sad situation.
you can go over to Australia and get a full scholarship to do this. And I want to stay in New Zealand because I like it here. And you can't do that. I just don't get it.
Stephen Joyce is the Minister responsible. Now, I spoke to him earlier before our student interviews came through, which is a pity, but I wanted to know if he was still a big backer of smart graduates.
Absolutely, and remain so.
Then why would you sort of cut the legs off some of these people, like the clinical psychology students, who say, look, we need to do postgraduate, but we're going to lose allowances?
Well, they're going to be effectively borrowing from the student loan scheme rather than getting the money through allowances. That's correct. And you know, once again, we're making choices. We want to keep investing in the tertiary system. We've got a very generous student support system in New Zealand, so those students will have had a 70% tuition subsidy right the way through their study. They'll have borrowed from the student loan scheme, which they write off at 40-something cents in the dollar. And instead of student allowances, we're saying they can borrow some more off the student loan scheme in their last year or two there. Then once they graduate, once you're a postgraduate in a master's or PhD, a master's graduate earns roughly 70% more on average than somebody who never gets to go to university, who is in fact subsidising their study.
I checked it out today. Clinical psychologists can earn up to $130,000, $139,000 in Western Australia.
Well, they can also earn significant sums of money here, Mark. And the point being as well is that, yes, it does lead to a significant sized student loan, but in the same way it does for doctors. I mean, doctors have some of the largest student loans, but they're also some of the fastest to pay them off.
But Minister, philosophically, though, just look at the philosophy for it. They started off doing their degrees under a certain set of rules. You've changed the rules midstream. That's what they see as unfair.
Well, I understand their view, but the reality is the student allowances are designed primarily to help people from low-income families to get a degree. Now, one of your young people in your example there has obviously not qualified for a student allowance all the way through their degree because their parents are earning over $90,000 a year, and now they've got to a certain age and they're now planning on claiming a student allowance. Now, I think actually when somebody who's at that point and they're about to leave university and earn a pretty good income, it's fair enough for them to borrow from what is, after all, let's not forget, an interest-free student loan scheme.
$90,000 a year. I thought the threshold that was adjusted was to $55,027.96.
Yeah, but I think that this particular person is not getting anything from the student allowance scheme, which would indicate their parents' income would have to be above 90 grand.
Look, are you sort of saying in some ways these are privileged whingers, Minister? You're saying, look, these are people, they're the cream, that they're whinging about when they get free stuff already from the government.
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, you know, we're all in a difficult financial times. We've got to choose where we make our investments. We're already providing what is one of the most generous student support schemes in the world to our students, which I think is well worth it because of the investment in our future. But actually saying to those at the real upper ends of the system that you can borrow instead from a student loan scheme which is interest-free, and in return that'll give us some money we can reinvest in engineering and those sorts of things for the next bunch of students coming through. I actually think that is pretty fair.
OK, the Minister, he said he's being more than fair. Joining me now is the President of the New Zealand Students' Association, Pete Hodkinson. Look, Pete, just before we go on to talk about the Minister, I've got to come back to this free lunch theory. Did you watch before? Let's just have another quick look at this.
It's not fair that people that are rich can go on to postgraduate study, but then if you're poor, you can't.
Why not borrow the money to meet your living costs?
Because that's debt. I don't think you should have to do that.
I've got debt coming out of my ass.
People are struggling, people are facing cuts right across the country. Why should students be immune to that?
I really don't accept that claim.
Joe, there's no such thing as a free lunch anymore.
Well, why shouldn't there be?
Look, and I want to be fair here, they were students at the Blockade the Budget meeting tonight. We weren't people we just plucked out of nowhere.
Sure thing.
You've got a problem, haven't you?
What's the problem?
Well, the problem is that they seem to be divorced from reality because they seem to be saying, yes, we are entitled to a free lunch.
Well, I think a lot of people are put under a lot of pressure in these interview situations. I mean, it's one thing to say that answer, yes, we should be allowed a free lunch, is saying, yes, we should be able to get free everything. But what's really the issue is this isn't something that we're talking about as a free lunch. We're talking about somebody's education, and an investment in that is something that's quite critical.
And look, I myself, the minister, most of those people making those decisions went through and got a free education. This is the problem. But the reality is now, what are you going to cut to subsidise students more? Isn't that the problem you're dealing with?
Well, we talk about making cuts, but realistically, is this the time to be making something like education more expensive?
Would you cut health? Would you cut pensions? I mean, this isn't it? This is always the problem you're going to have with education. As valuable as we know it is, if solo mothers are being hit, if other people are being hit, why should students be so special?
Well, I think that there's quite a common misconception that students are somehow the super privileged group that sit on the outskirts of society, and same with graduates. The claim is there that interest-free loans make us a privileged group. But realistically, look at the people around this room that are probably graduates, the technicians that are working here. Anybody you've encountered in the medical profession, nurses, every time your car gets serviced. These are not people that are sitting outside regular society. They're everyday citizens.
But the issue is that they're having allowances taken away from them, and now you're told, hey, get a loan. And they're saying the loan is big enough already. That's the nub of it, isn't it?
Well, that is the nub of it. But a lot of these changes are being brought through under the premise that it's supposed to bring some sort of solution through to the problem of student debt. Now, if the answer is students either need to work part-time, and we've seen from the examples tonight that a lot of students are not capable of doing that, then the money has to come from somewhere. And if it's coming from debt, then that's no real solution at all.
One of the issues that does fascinate me with this is and Stephen Joyce has been at the vanguard of it, is we need a more educated society. And you've got to feel sorry for the clinical psychology students who are going to take 7 years to qualify. Absolutely. Because they are getting hit. So do you need to concentrate it more on some groups, do you think, than others?
I mean, we're seeing hints of that happening at the moment. Where that money needs to be concentrated is debatable. But I think if we take a step back and look at the real issues and where this funding is going into education and what the outcomes of education are, look at 90% of the jobs that are in Victoria University's Career Hub. They're listed as jobs for all graduates, not specific graduates, because 90% of employers are looking for a graduate, not necessarily a graduate with a specific degree. It's about the transferable skills that you can develop.
OK, listen, just finally, the students are getting out there, they're getting grumpy. Realistically, can you change this, or you just got to make it an issue?
I think there are several ways that you can change it. One way is you can change it through the lead up to the budget, and obviously we've missed that bracket, the budget is out. But where this really changes is in change of government. It's a change of attitudes in government, and that's still very possible.
Well, we've got another 18 months to wait before that could even remotely happen. Look, Pete Hodgkinson, thanks for coming in. Appreciate it.